fintechs become telecommunication companies, they go into private banking, they do mortgages. So that's pretty broad, I would say, and I think this is probably the next frontier that
Here at Money 2020 Europe in Amsterdam, partnerships, collaborations, conversations, it's all happening, especially when it comes to financial technology and innovating in the global money ecosystem. Well, I'm pleased to welcome leaders from two companies partnering together in this space. We have the CIO of Raisin and the founder and CEO of Upvest with us in our studio space for the New York Stock Exchange here in Amsterdam. Gentlemen, welcome. Kim, we'll start with you, of course, Raisin's CIO. I think many people probably, at least in Europe, know your company, the one that you work for, as a B2C company when it comes to savings and investments. I want to hear more about the B2B business and how partnerships play a role in that.
I hope that increasingly also in the US people know us as a B2C business because we're active there too, but of course we're bigger in Europe. And we're offering B2B2C partnerships in very different degrees. So what we're doing is, for example, the interest rate market, Zinsmarkt in German, for Deutsche Bank. So we're running this for them and they distribute our deposits to their private customers. We're doing something similar with Aviva, for example, in the UK. So we do have sizable partnerships with other fintechs and traditional incumbents.
Interesting. Martin, I want to hear from you in terms of the infrastructure, right? That's not always necessarily the most evident or visible when it comes to how transactions happen, of course, especially when it comes to banks and wealth managers. How does the infrastructure need to change in this current landscape?
So I would say there are two things that you really have to improve as a bank or wealth manager on the infrastructure side. The one is really improving the user experience, having like a clean flow from account opening to investing and the whole post-trade management. For this you use partners like us eventually and others. And secondly, you have to reduce the cost point. Yeah? So right now when you actually look at banks and wealth managers, they pay internally more than a couple of euros per trade, whereas like fintechs like Trade Republic and others actually pay some cents. And if you really want to reduce the price point, you also actually have to work with infrastructure providers that can enable this. Yeah? And then there are a couple of other things that are also important, like fractional investing, portfolio management, overall pretty digitally, but overall I would say those two, user experience and cost, are two things that you have to look at as a bank.
How is the Raisin partnership helping Upvest?
So first of all, it's a great fintech client in Europe, a very successful one, so also not far away from our offices in Berlin. And I think they have really nailed the depository business with interest rate products, but they also have a really powerful wealth solution, with a couple of billions actually in assets. And back in the days, they were not super happy with their existing provider, so we could migrate these assets on our platform and do this now more seamless, more cost-effective, and more towards growth for the future.
And we're very happy with Upvest.
Yeah, I do want to hear more about that from your perspective, Kim, and how partnerships are helping Raisin really expand its target groups.
So, of course, the partnership we have with Upvest is where we are the customer, so that doesn't help us directly to other end customers. The partnerships that I was referring to at the beginning of our conversation, those are actually incumbents like Deutsche Bank or other fintechs that allow us to access their customer base. And I think the market is so big so that the B2C approach that one provider has will not suit for all customers within that market. And I think in that way we can just expand the addressable market for us.
I'm curious to hear from you, Martin, in terms of what you think is next in fintech. It's a big conversation here, right, at Money 2020 Europe, and what have you taken away so far?
I would say there are a couple of trends that I see here. First of all, the whole AI trend, using AI as agents to automate certain things in the user experience and make things cheaper. The second one is probably that you still diversify revenues. So the fintech started with a very simple product, and now Revolut, for instance, has more than 30 different revenue streams. And I think this will continue. You see right now fintechs become telecommunication companies, they go into private banking, they do mortgages. So that's pretty broad, I would say. And I think this is probably the next frontier, that diversify revenues and using AI to take out the middleman to make it more cost effective.
That's interesting. For both of you, before we have to wrap here, of course you do have a strong presence in Europe, a presence in the US, as you mentioned too, Kim. What is next in the coming years for Raisin?
So I think geographical expansion will continue and continue also for all product categories. So we started with deposits. We're offering investment services at the moment only in Germany. We'll expand to more countries in the future, probably first European, but then also the US at one point. And then I think looking at the insanely big market, just increasing the market penetration in the markets we're in will be the cornerstone of our strategy.
And Martin at Upvest, what do you think the next few years hold?
Internationalization is one, so we opened our office in the UK, FCA regulated since last year, so really growing in the UK for fintechs and banks. And then you still have 10,000 banks in Europe that still run on outdated infrastructure, so we try to tackle them in their specific markets across Europe.
All right, and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining, and I hope you enjoyed Money 2020.